Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Operation Redwood podcast. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Ooh.
Happy holidays.
Oh, you guys are welcome. You guys are all welcome. Merry Christmas. And as we wrap up this David series, we have a gift for you guys. So everyone who is on our newsletter, you should have received that email this morning with our notes from the David series, our tangibles of the warrior, king, lover, and friend. And as we wrap up this series and we celebrate Christmas, we are just going to quickly talk over what we just went through the last 6 weeks of the David series, because it was a lot. Right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
what were some big takeaways from you? What do you think out of the lover, king, warrior, and friend? What was like a big something that really hit you over the last couple episodes?
Something that I found really interesting, and actually we didn't even talk about, actually you briefly mentioned it, when Saul sent to go kill all of God's, I'm going to call them pastors, but there's a different word for it, the people who served in the holy place. Yeah. Drawing a blank right now for the word, but anyways, I found it interesting how, you know, you read a story so many times and you get a little, not jaded, but you get a little,
because you've read it so many times, it's kind of like whatever. Like,
you just kind of breeze through it and you go through the motions. But when you actually sit down, you slow down and you get to read the story, you pick up little things here and there, right? And you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. And why did he do that? You know, I've read the story before, but now I'm barely thinking about this. So when
that happened,
Saul went to go, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just like the first episode. Sorry to cut you off, but it was like when you were like, David was anointed, and then 10 years later, I was like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy because they don't specify this, in the Bible.
Yeah. But
you piece it together like a puzzle the more you read. So anyways, when David was hiding, right, with the priests, and Saul went to go get David, right, he sent 2 armies, right, and then he went himself, and all 3 times God protected David. Mm-hmm. And so he's there with the priests, and he can't be touched, apparently, right? He's probably in the safest place that God has put him, right? But for whatever reason, David was like, you know what? I need to leave. I'm not safe here. Yeah. And then he goes, and that's when he tries to, fit in with the Philistines, thinking they're not going to recognize him, and they're just like, "Isn't this David?" And isn't this the guy who's trying to kill us all, right?
No, I'm Mavid. Yeah. Not the same.
And he has to go to the point where he has to act like a special person, or like a crazed person,
I do remember
drooling and all that stuff. And it's like God had already put you in one of the best place to be, and because you had your own humanly manly way of thinking, you thought, I'm not safe here, when God already delivered you supernaturally 3 times. Yeah. Ooh. And because you can't fathom something, why it's working, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that God doesn't have your back, and God knows better, and sometimes we don't understand it, and we're just like, I'm in a bad place, but really that's where God wants you, and he shows you that you're going to be okay. But just because you're in the fire, you're like, oh no, I'm in the fire. But you're like, instead of saying, wow, these flames are not burning me. You know what I mean? So that was my biggest takeaway from my reads. I was just like, I've read this story before, but I never really thought about that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good.
Man.
That's really good.
Absolutely. On my end, I think that it would be like trusting the process, because for those 10 years when Dave was like, yo, I'm supposed to be king or whatever, you could only imagine what he was going through mentally. Like, when is this thing going to happen? And then you get to the point where he is king now, and he's having to look over all these people. But then prior to that, having to flee from the person that was supposed to be loving on him. So trusting in the process and knowing that God actually has a plan for you. At times it's hard, right? Because we have our own desires, and in those desires, we end up finding ourselves, at times in the field. Where it's like, dude, I thought that this was supposed to happen already. But trusting in the process, knowing that it's going to come to fruition, I think that was my key takeaway.
That's good.
Yeah.
Both really good points.
It is really hard too, because it's one thing to be in the fire and not being burned, right? But it's a whole entire situation when you have to go for 5 years in captivity, and you have to go hide in the desert and in the cave, and you just gotta be like, all right, God, I know you said I'm gonna be king, so I'm gonna be king, Oh, yeah. And something also interesting that I heard is you're kind of invincible. I want to say that word, invincible, until God's plan has seen to fruition.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's another thing that you see with David, and this guy was obviously like top-notch warrior, and he was in battle so many times. But until he became king, no one can touch David, because God said, "You will be the next king of Israel."
Yeah.
And it's an interesting fact or thought, I would say, interesting thought, because he went through so many things, and there's so many times when he should have been dead, but God delivered him.
Yeah. Man.
If you think about it nowadays, if someone were to tell you, like, "Oh yeah, you're untouchable," you're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Like,
it feels
no one
nice.
can touch me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
but that doesn't mean you're not going to go through the situation. You know what I mean? Like through the bad.
Right. It's almost like this certain ego comes to you, where you're like, but David's, he's like, he was cool about it. He was like, all right, cool. Like, we're gonna keep doing God's work.
Let's see.
He had to be humble. That's the thing. He had to be humble.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he was going about everything via prayer as well, man.
Yes.
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 So-
That just goes to show how powerful prayer really is.
Yeah, man.
Because it's so hard to say things and just put it out into the world, say it to God, whatever, and then like not see it right off the bat.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
like, ooh.
Yeah.
Or like you really, really want something. It's like, God, I really want this, right?
Exactly.
But God's like, either you're not ready, or that wouldn't be good for you in the long run.
Yeah.
It looks good at first,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
later down the road, you're going to be like, it's not going to be for you. It's not good for your soul.
Oh, man. But I don't know about you guys, but I find myself like truly only praying when, I'm going through a situation like, oh, God, please take this pressure off of me type deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think
As
we've all
opposed-
been there for
yeah,
sure.
man, as opposed to being able to pray, like, thank you for waking me up this morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I get there sometimes, but then at other times I miss the mark. And then, like, as I'm going through my desk, like, oh, man, I haven't prayed at all today. You know what I mean? So as opposed to being in constant, conversation and whatnot with God, now I'm just going about my day on my own. And then I encounter a harsh situation throughout the day. It's like, oh, Lord, please. And it's like, oh, this is the first time that I said anything to you today. Like, how are you doing?
You remember me?
Hey, Daddy.
Hey, Daddy.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's me again.
Good morning, Daddy. Good morning, Daddy.
That's awesome. You're absolutely right, man. We have to always inquire with God. We always have to keep up with Him. We always have to be telling Him what's on our. He already knows, right? And we see this all throughout Scripture, and it's even said in the Gospels that He knows the petition of our hearts. He knows what we want, what our desires, our needs, right? But He just likes for us to go to Him, for us to humble ourselves and be like, yeah, I need you, and to have that, keep that relationship. And we see that in David too, whenever he wanted to go against the Philistines, you know what I mean? Yeah. He went and inquired God, right? And then his men, right, in I forgot the name of the men, but they eventually became his warriors. They were like, no, you're crazy. Like, how about when you become king, then we'll go against the Philistines, right? But he was like, oh, you don't, I already inquire with God, but you don't believe me? Okay, all right, let's go talk to the big man, whatever. And so, he goes and inquires with God again, and God's like, hey, do the thing. I already told you. And then his men were like, oh, God said so, I guess we got to do it. And so they went and they won, And so it's important to always be in constant communion with God, to walk with God. It's if he's a person, you know what I mean? And it's just like you said, and I always find myself there. It's like, oh God, can you know what? I haven't spoken to you all day, and I'm just here like asking for something.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Do you always wake up like this?
Yeah. But I'm rushing God, so we better,
But I'm rushing.
Yeah. But and it's awkward, right? To be that friend that calls a friend whenever they need something only. You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead of being a friend. Exactly. Hey, man, guess what happened to me last night? Or, hey, dude, what's going on with you? How the kids? Whatever. Hey, let's go hang out. Let's go do this, XYZ, right? But then instead you just call them at
when you need
2 a.m., and they're just like, I need a favor.
Yeah, exactly. It's filthy. Man, so I want to ask you guys, do you think that we end up having the same relationship with God that we end up having with our friends where, hey, if I'm dealing with something specific, right, I know who to call to go about getting the answer that I want. You know what I mean? So if Alfredo was the yes man, but anytime I call Angela, it's like, I don't know, you might want to think about that a little bit more. You know what I mean? Do we end up having that same relationship with God when we go about, just our interaction with him? Like, when we truly want something, are we seeking God out in those moments where it's like, hey, I really want this thing? Or are we going about it, selfishly and like, okay, nobody else can do anything for me, so I'm just going to continue on. And then as soon as you meet that little bit of friction, it's like, God, please come through for me. I really need this. You know what I mean? So at those points of, friction, is that when we're involving God, or is it, throughout the whole process?
It's a good question.
That is good. I think you hit it right on the money, and we're talking about it is yes. Like most of us approach God with that. When I need something, I'll hit you up. Really, But when things are good, like, I got this.
Yeah.
We're good.
Exactly.
I don't got nothing. We're good. Like,
Yeah.
we're good. Don't change nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't change nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the approach that we take. And if we look back to how we treat people, that's not right either.
Yeah.
Like I just can't call you up when I need something.
Yeah.
Because how many times do we notice when people call us that when they need something,
He must want something.
they must want right?
We look at our phones.
He needs some money.
Guy.
Man.
That's why Brian never picks up my phone calls.
Not this month, buddy.
No.
Always on the 1st and 15th.
Only
I'm telling you, man.
It's payday.
it's payday. Oh, today's Brian's payday. It's perfect.
That's awesome.
It's perfect.
I just want to check up on you,
just
see
want-
how everything
hey,
was
just-
going.
I just want to check up on you.
Telling you,
good.
man.
But yeah, dude, like we have that with people too, and when we treat people that way, no one's gonna want to be around us because we don't want to be around those people.
Yeah.
So it's so easy for us to see, oh, this person's calling me. How about you see how maybe you don't do that for the money sense, right? Like we're joking around, but maybe you do that with other things where you only reach out to people for certain things.
Yeah.
And it's a great time to self-reflect. Like we see all these errors in other people, but it's just like, bro, it's just look, how does that turn to me? What in my own character, in myself, do I need to change? Like, how am I being like that?